You don't have a foreign language problem, you have an adult literacy problem. Written by Khatzumoto, posted in January of 2009. This article is super long, so here's a Cliff's Notes. There's a total of 3 parts. Part 1 is a brief history of why people still talk smack about Sino-Xenic, Kanji using languages, leading to Part 2, where we realize that when dealing with any language, Sino-Xenic or otherwise, what we are dealing with is not a foreign language problem, but an adult illiteracy problem. Finally, in Part 3, we find that Pedro will make all your dreams come true, and also solve your adult illiteracy issues. Pedro. Narrator's note, I just wanted to make a quick warning that this post may be considered a little spicy by some, so don't choose this video to be the introduction for your grandma that you've wanted to show this series to. Also, I replaced 2 slur-esque words in this narration bit, as to not have this video's reach reduced. The video/script is untouched as always, so if you want to know what Khatzumoto wrote, you can just see it in the timecodes in the description. Thanks and enjoy. Part 1. Pens, Swords, and Missionaries. Back in the day, the various nations of the western peninsula of the Eurasian landmass had just gotten done recovering from a massive 1,000-year hangover after a drunken party in which they had destroyed their only stable nation-state, along with all its accumulated knowledge and human expertise, and proceeded to brutally brawl amongst themselves using weapons inspired by S&M movies. Finally able to stand on their own feet, they set about sharing their extensive experience in violence with the world, with anyone and everyone they met. Theirs was a 3-pronged approach, perhaps the most comprehensive offensive in human history, making use of the pen, the sword, and the cadre of highly trained psychologists called missionaries. Before we get into all that, kitten! The missionaries used a mind control technique known as Christianity to tell people to give up on the real world, enjoy being beaten with the S&M weapons, turn the other cheek, B-Arch, God loves you, he loves you baby, yeah, and pin all their hopes on a future world that, supposedly, existed after death. This future world was as idyllic as it was unfalsifiable, and worked well on the more trusting of foreign nations. Footnote 1. Japan and China had strong BS radar, and made proselytizing, indeed, the mind control method itself, an illegal or highly restricted activity. It probably helped that Japan's leaders at the time caught wind of at least one ill-timed, open admission of the true purpose of missionary activities. Quote, the Spanish design for world conquest. An indispensable part of that design was a 5th column of Spanish friars, sent ahead of military forces to Christianize the people of a country so that the land could be easily taken over. End quote and end footnote. The pen was used both at home and abroad, at home to stir up xenophobia towards foreign peoples and their civilizations, abroad to stir up autophobia, self-hate, among foreign peoples and their civilizations, and when all else failed, the sword, in various forms, was applied generously. It worked, and the world's writing systems ended up like this. Everywhere, though Europeans and their descendants visited, they stole, brainwashed, raped, and murdered until they had forced the religion and writing system on their hosts. As fond of efficiency as of violence, they started to figure out just who and what needed to be killed in order to make the theft of land and people complete, a policy that might be described as decapitation. Every society rests on the shoulders of a handful of people and/or texts, a head, if you will. Sever the head, and the body tends to be quite ineffectual. Finally, to cover their tracks, they developed 2 intricate distribution systems: distribution, division of labor, and distribution of responsibility. As such, they managed to commit atrocities using people who were not necessarily fully aware of the entire scheme, and then act as if it were no one's fault. Puppets were attached by strings to other puppets in a nested chain of puppet upon puppet, so long that it takes an enormous amount of work to find out just who, in fact, was the puppeteer. It was the perfect crime. This same intricate labor, division, responsibility, dissipation system continues today, allowing Western societies to commit acts of violent cruelty both at home and abroad, and then shrug it off and act helpless. Consider the stake. One person kills an animal inhumanely, another cuts up her body parts, another packs them, another ships them, another stocks them, another buys them, another cooks them, and another eats them. Are the people who ate the animal the murderers? The person who cooked the body parts? Or is it the person who bought the parts? The part-time worker at the supermarket who stocked them? The truck driver who shipped them? The meat packer who packed them? The guy who cut them up? The woman who pushed the button to stun the cow? The person who turned on the switch on the machine that, apparently quite frequently, pulls off cows' body parts while they're still alive? The person who wrote the design document for the machine? The editor who allows ads for the machine to run in its trade publication? the graphic designer who does the layout for the ad, the farmer who sent his cows to the slaughterhouse, the farm worker who, while the cow was alive, injected her with so many funky hormones that she could no longer stand up, the engineer who wrote the software that processes credit card transactions for meat purchases, the chemist who synthesizes the hormones. So, by now some may be wondering, does Khatzumoto hate Whitey? No, Khatzumoto loves Whitey. All his friends are Whitey. Khatzumoto married Whitey. A good number of Europeans and members of European extension communities were either made unaware of what was happening or bullied into acting unaware. It was all a well-orchestrated affair with many players, including psychos. Footnote 2. See Australia as penal colony for an example. End footnote. For killing and stealing, academics were justifying. Footnote 3. See just about any book about non-Europeans pre-1960s for details. End footnote. It al. And settlers for covering up the evidence by reproducing and generally playing dumb. Footnote 4. Just shut up and pretend nothing happened. End footnote. Now, as an internet discussion gets longer, the probability that someone will refer to Hitler asymptotically approaches 1. So let's make our obligatory Nazi reference here. Ordinary German citizens were either unaware or forcibly quote-unquote unaware of the existence of, let's just say, rustic accommodations out east for Jewish Europeans. A good number of the German people were kept in forced ignorance, or sometimes forced quote-unquote ignorance. A minority of ordinary Germans even stood up for justice. At the same time, this does not erase a certain amount of responsibility, nor does it erase the existence of the rustic accommodations, nor does it erase the need to make these things known and repair them. Or are you going to go up to Viktor Frankl and say, dude, it couldn't have been that bad. You got a book deal out of it and everything. I like your hair, by the way. Was it always been curly like that? Anyway, bringing it back to language. Times have changed, but the writings from back when it was okay to openly proclaim that Asian people and their civilizations were inferior still exist. Footnote 5. It's still okay. All you have to do is be more oblique about it. Just ask the New York Times, according to whom them Chinese ain't nothing but a top-down memorization-based elite who couldn't organize a flexible, innovative information economy if their little jet black heads depended on it, no matter how brilliant they may be. Gee willikers, NYT. Thanks for letting us know that them thar yellow peril be upon us. Where's my victory garden? End footnote. Many of them may be far too uncool or old school to be read now, but the memes they produced are still alive and well, repeated in subsequent pieces of research, and I use the word research to the loosest sense possible. Take, for example, my history class at an accredited 4-year institution of higher learning in a certain United States of America, where the instructor quite happily discussed, with visual aids, how ideograms like Kanji or Hanzi represented the lowest, dumbest, most primitive form of writing system, and alphabets the highest, with syllabaries like kana and adjabs like Hebrew and Arabic somewhere in the middle. Kanji sucks. East Asian people are stupid drones who reproduce too much and all look alike, and the Chinese civilization has no creativity. But China is modernizing and in a few years may stop using those ghastly squiggles. These were the exact words of my history instructor, the ones in quotes, said many times in front of hundreds of students, some of them Chinese. You know them Chinese, always getting straight A's and taking all the scholarships that used to go to the mediocre people like us. Wait. A lot of the time, when people make claims about the Chinese writing system and Sino-Xenic languages, they are merely parroting this kind of attitude, an attitude from the days of gunboat diplomacy, calling people the sick man of Asia, and countless attempts to break up the Chinese state by stirring up ethnic division. Footnote 6. Simple divide and conquer. It'll break up a band. You don't need these guys, you make this band. And it'll break up a country. You Manchurians are different. You're better. You don't need those guys. End footnote. This has led to the ossification of the Kanji are hard, Chinese is hard myth, a myth so often repeated that it is quite frequently taken as fact. This fact becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, reinforced every time people come to learn Chinese and Japanese and try to use their eyes, elbows, and wrists to learn kanji, and invariably fail, without ever trying to engage the old brain. Footnote 7. I used to try to learn Hanzi by writing each one out 50 times. My form, shape, balance, and prettiness improved, but I didn't remember a single one. Is this the fault of Hanzi? Or is it my fault for using the wrong tools for the job? Am I at fault if I try to use fax machine paper in the toilet and it doesn't flush? Or is it those darn Japanese fax machine companies? End footnote. The key thing that many keep failing to realize is that learning kanji is an intellectual exercise, not a physical one. You need to use your brain, not your wrist for endlessly repeating writing, not reams of paper for copying out the same character a cajillion times, not your mouth for whining out loud, not your fingers for ranting on the internet message boards, not even really your eyes for seeing a picture. Footnote 8. Blind schoolchildren in Japan learn kanji, too. End footnote. It's not a test of brute strength, it merely requires a tiny bit of mental flexibility, and now, with an SRS, all you need is some consistency. Wow, way too freaking long. Anyway, so yeah, I came to this realization with a lot of help and a lot of love from folks like Heisig, Sisk Noguchi, Hauser, and Wozniak. Speaking of the pen, one tactic of cultural genocide used by Europeans back in the day was not only to suggest that Europeans had trouble learning kanji, but that the original kanji-using people themselves could not use them. They assumed adult literacy in the Sinosphere to be low. Ironically, Japanese people to this day help keep perpetuating this myth. When you know kanji, Japanese people will tell you, "Wow, even I can't write that." This is called a compliment. They don't mean it. They're just being nice. They can write the darn kanji. Indeed, over the past several months, I have challenged many of my Japanese acquaintances to little kanji tournaments. They have been able to write everything I have thrown at them. The only way I have won is by lobbing ridiculously curvy curveballs. The equivalent in English would be like asking someone to spell and define floxinaucinihilipilification. Of course you would win, but for what? Also, every once in a while, on the news here in Japan, they show people talk about how them youngins nowadays with their computies ain't writing their kanji no more. Wanna know why that's on the news? Because it's newsworthy. Most people are absolutely fine reading and writing their kanji. Don't believe me? Neither did General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, Knight Grand Cross to the Most Honorable Military Order of the Bath and Field Marshal of the Philippine Army, recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, husband to a murdered son, father to a murdered wife, and he would have his vengeance in this life or the Wait. MacArthur, or Biggie Mac as he was known to his friends, believed the Japanese people to be inferior, at a developmental stage analogous to that of a child when compared to the adult, fully grown West. And as supreme military ruler of all the Japans, following that little worldwide scuffle in the 1940s, he was going to tell those slant-eyed Beelzebubs who was boss. Effin' Japanese. This is the real deal, folks. One of his many orders to his occupation government, he decided that
言語というものは広大なる行動であって、決して障害物であってはならないのである。この世に永久の平和をもたらしたいと願う思慮深い人々は、場所を問わず、男女を問わず、国家の孤立性と排他性の精神を支える言語的支柱をできる限り崩し去る必要があるものと自覚している。ローマ字の採用は国境を越えた知識や思想の伝達のために大きな貢献をすることになるであろう。
Translation: Change to Roman script, you bloody wogs, or I shall drop another nuclear bomb on you. Also, China, you're next, mother lovers. End quote. Of course, MacArthur was far too well trained in hiding his true feelings to actually come out and say something so gauche. Footnote 9. We often call this being a gentleman. End footnote. Instead, he coaches his words in appeals to international communication, breaking down barriers, and sharing ideas. This is a fundamental technique found in the brainwashing carried out by colonial powers. Religion or no religion always appeal to universal principles, as long as they're our universal principles. Footnote 10. This appeal to universality still has many Africans and people of African descent fooled to this day. Outside of the stereotypical American Bible Belt, they are the last major group of true believers, left holding the baby. They honestly think Christianity is relevant to them. This is not at all to say that Christianity is bad or anything silly like that. Christianity is not bad, it's just bad for Africans. My point is, ice cream is tasty. Kittens. End footnote. Works every time. In fact, it's so well phrased that I want my country to be invaded, occupied, and reprogrammed right now. Mac didn't think these rice-eating, fish-loving SOBs could read kanji, their own language, and he set out to prove it. He issued forth a national test/survey of literacy, Nihonjin no Yomikaki no Ryoku Chousa, aimed at, as I recall, adults of both genders and from all strata of society throughout Japan. Now, what MacArthur didn't know is that Japan, thanks initially to the Terakoya, or temple sideroom system, has had near universal literacy since medieval times. That's right, in the Edo period, when samurai walked the earth, Japan already had full literacy and a fully developed popular literature. Medieval pop lit, that's how hardcore Japan was. Regular people, man, woman, rich, poor, reading. And this is back when Japan publicly made full use of two written standards, Kanbun, so-called classical Chinese, although it's actually easier to read than post-1912 modern standard Japanese, and Kundokubun, Japanese written more or less as spoken, with Japanese grammar and word order. Verily, let it be known that the world's first novel was written by a woman in Japan who taught herself kanji in her spare time. This was back before even the Edo period, when kanji learning was still brand spanking new to Japan and limited to men. until she got better at it than her husband, despite, footnote 11, or because of, end footnote, his having a tutor and all that. In a sense, it's telling that Biggie Mac was a completely illiterate man. In fact, he had gone his entire life unable to read. Japanese, that is. Of course, he could never see the meaning nor even the possibility of such a thing. And that's fine. It's just that he had no place making decisions about literacy. Do you ever see Michael Jordan urging women to use his special brand of tampons? Wait till I get my hands on you would take on a much more blush-inducing connotation. So, anyway, they didn't have trouble reading in Japan. And this was reflected in the results from MacArthur's test. The test conclusively demonstrated two things. 1. Liv Tyler is hot whether or not she has makeup. 2. Japanese people could read. Their own freaking language. Very darn well, thank you very much. Both genders, all classes. Yes, housewives too. Also, makeup doesn't actually do Liv Tyler justice. Nope. But by now there were enough puppets in the Japanese government, enough brainwashed people that wanted to wipe out kanji in Japan, as had been done by France in Vietnam, that a compromise had to be reached. That compromise was the Toyo, later Joyo kanji, or general use kanji, system, whereby forms were changed that didn't need changing, and some attempt was made to limit the number of characters used despite there not needing any limiting. Footnote 12. Taiwan and Hong Kong don't do limiting. End footnote. Importantly, these changes were not made for the benefit of readers, writers, or learners. They didn't need them. They didn't want them. They were made to placate then powerful / well-backed groups who lobbied variously for Anglicization / Romanization / Kanization. They also served, quite conveniently, to put an unnecessary hurdle between pre- and post-war Japanese literature, weakening people's connection to their own history, which, as we know, works very well when you're trying to mold a nation into a new shape you've picked. See Communist China for further instructions. Fortunately, the people of Japan love their kanji. Names of people, places, and organizations have remained quite unscathed. Examples are everywhere. Every change to the approved kanji list since the occupation era has been an addition, and there are more on the way. Part 2. Adult Literacy. Back when I was at that college with the otherwise intelligent professor with the lively disdain for Chinese civilization, the local town public library was having an adult literacy initiative. I had heard about it once or twice before, but it shocked me to see it in real life. It turns out that many in the US, the wealthiest, most powerful country in the world, cannot read at all, or cannot read well enough to complete simple daily tasks, such as filling in forms or traveling using street signs. This is despite free, universal, compulsory schooling. It's a bit of a stretch to call it education. You can find out more about it here. Living in the Shadows, Illiteracy in America. Illiterate in America. Conquering Illiteracy, One Man's Fight. Adult Illiteracy in Canada. Narrator's note, links are in the description. If ABC News is to be believed, then something on the order of 10% of the American population is no-can-ready, i.e. more than 1 in 10 adults in the United States are driving through life with their phasers set to stunningly ignorant. What happened to the beautiful simplicity and obviousness of alphabets? What happened to that? I thought the memo said... The US is not alone. In other, poorer countries, using an alphabet and even completely phonetic spelling, illiteracy is rampant. What the frickin' heck is going on? My college town public library's initiative came at a time when I was attempting to become literate in Chinese and Japanese. I was haltingly, stumblingly beginning to use my literacy in English to become literate in other languages, and economically valuable ones at that. Literacy was giving birth to more literacy, knowledge to more knowledge. Back then, I was also an avid comic reader, and I mean avid. I went through hundreds of pages a day, and it shocked me that there were people in my very own college town that were not enjoying the power of the written word to inform, entertain, and enrich. I resolved to help people share the joy, the power, the magic. Footnote 13. Mnet. End footnote. My college was big on volunteering, and I had always felt guilty that I had never helped in any of the service projects. I guess none of them ever struck me as being truly meaningful or effective, just empty hype. But this was different. This I could sink my teeth into. I, Katz, was going to help people, and I proudly announced this to one of my service-active friends. She knows who she is. But then I realized that the illiterate townspeople... Footnote 14. This is easily the most condescending two-word combination I've ever written. End footnote. Didn't need my help. Or, they did, but they weren't going to get it. Not because I was a busy, poorly self-managed college student, but because I realized that I needed my help. Because, folks, as it turns out, despite being a college student, I was illiterate. Yes, I could not read, Chinese or Japanese. Just as Malcolm X once reframed the US civil rights issue as a misnamed human rights problem. Footnote 15. While we're on the subject, let's just get this off my chest. 1. Simplified form sucks. 2. Tibet is part of China. 3. Marvel is better than DC, but Superman gets tradition points. 4. Everyone who wants to write comics in English should first be required to get training or permission from Alan Moore, Warren Ellis, and Craig Thompson. 5. Tibet is still part of China. End footnote. So I reframed my linguistic issue. I came to the following realization. You do not have a foreign language problem. You have an adult illiteracy problem. You are not a foreigner learning a foreign language. You are an illiterate adult learning your own language. The problem of adult illiteracy in cause, symptom, and solution is exactly the same as that of illiteracy for learners of a foreign language. If you look at the statistics ABC News brought up, kids who grow into adults are illiterate not because they're stupid, but merely because they have not logged the hours with text. Literacy is directly proportional to time spent with text. When no time is spent with text, no literacy develops. When insufficient time is spent with text, insufficient literacy develops. One is pure illiteracy, the other is functional illiteracy. Take your pick. Time spent with text is a function of 1. Time to spend, and 2. Access to text in large quantity and wide variety. Both are necessary. People in poverty tend to lack at least one of these, so poverty and illiteracy tend to accompany each other. Illiteracy in mainland China fits under this rubric. Do you need a diagram? Most learners of a foreign language, any foreign language, remain, like a novice skater to the wall of the rink, glued to their textbooks, a boring, sanitized, artificial mutant subset of their target language. As a result, if they get good at anything at all, they get good at handling a boring, sanitized, artificial, mutant subset of, you get the picture. Their exposure to native materials is insufficient at best, if not non-existent, and their language skills suffer accordingly. So it shall be written, so it shall be done. Footnote 16. Or shall it? End footnote. Pre-internet, lack of access to native texts was a natural consequence of physical constraints involved in moving glued-together strips of dead tree. Now, at least for us who have internet access, this is much less of an issue. To repeat, the adult illiteracy problem is not limited to Chinese and Japanese. Learners of all language experience it all the time. Perhaps worse so, because they often remain oblivious to it. Next time you meet someone who claims to know or be studying some French or Spanish, show them a newspaper/news magazine or the manual of their microwave. Can they read it without a dictionary? If not, then they are functionally illiterate. It doesn't matter jack that they can perhaps sound it out, or even then, how well. If they cannot read and comprehend it without undue reliance on reference materials and within a reasonable amount of time, then they are illiterate. French and Spanish are supposed to be easy. They are the present default foreign languages for English speakers. France and Spain and even Turkey are supposed to be easy to travel through, unlike Japan and China where you get owned by Kanji. Closer examination reveals this to be hogwash. On the one hand, it's probably the case that alphabetic writing systems will give you an early feeling of, can read, mama? That is, until you hit upon the problem that you actually have to learn all the words separately, and there's very little reuse going on. A learner of Japanese, knowing buta as pig and niku as meat, now knows the correct word for butaniku, or pork, as well as half of gyuniku, beef, and indeed any other animal meat. Not so phonetic, are we? As well as nikutai, physical/of the flesh, as in nikutai kanke, or sexual relationship/relationship of the flesh. A learner of English has to learn these things separately, and that's only the beginning. Take me, really, all of me. Take me as I am. Okay, no. Anyway, I took 3 years of German while at high school in England. I went on 2 exchange trips to Germany. I got the highest grade possible, A*, in both written and oral sections of the national examination for German proficiency, yet I had never read a German newspaper, geeky publication, or even a youth magazine, nor could I. But I supposedly knew German. The process said so. The school said so. The British government said so. Footnote 17. Which begs the question, who the frock died and made them got of German? What's even funnier is that a philosopher might tell you that that's not the correct way to use beg the question. You like these footnotes, don't you? I tried adding footnotes to footnotes, but it wouldn't let me. I wanted to realize that Matthew Perry joke from Almost Heroes. End footnote. I could not freely conduct or comprehend written communication in the German language. No excuses need be made for this. I was illiterate, plain and simple. This is German, folks. The orthography is all nice and regular. Plus, it's very closely related to this English of ours, both linguistically and ethnically. And it's the good old Roman alphabet, God's language. Why don't I hear people talking smack about how the Roman alphabet is fundamentally broken and inferior, and it's all apples and oranges and Goebbels wore Gucci underwear and the Germans are this and that? Yeah, I wonder why. Part 3. Extensive reading will make all your dreams come true. Also, your adult illiteracy problems will be solved. Want to get good at reading and writing in any language? Then read more. A lot more. A lot. You need to become baptized in the Church of Text. No, screw that. Baptism is only once. You need to drink the holy text water for breakfast, elevenses, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, midnight snack, and everything in between. There's you, footnote 18, in a van down by the river, end footnote. There's text. You and the written word in your target language are going to be buddies from now on. You're going to be so tight, your wife will be all, "I know you don't go up there to catch the fish," footnote 19. Perhaps less tight, end footnote. That means a book in your bag, a book by your bedside, books in the toilet, and L2 text on your computer screen. And yes, for Japanese learners, it even means less reading of this site, unless it's the Japanese sections, which I intend to start expanding soon enough. And I think that you will find that not only will you become literate in Chinese/Japanese, but you will find them easier than phonetic writing systems. Not just because of the visual power of the characters, but also because of the amazing ability to create compound words, even making the most apparently complex of concepts, the most expert of expert vocabulary, fully comprehensible to the layman. The Meiji Jidai/Meiji era mass translation of Western scientific literature and vocabulary into kanji often receives credit for turning the already highly literate Japanese population into a highly well-informed juggernaut. Footnote 20. That eventually juggernauted all the way to China, somewhat, uninvited, and without knocking first. But a juggernaut nonetheless. End footnote. With kanji, it's like the veil of jargon is never allowed to fall. There is no iron curtain of terminology. Everything is transparent. Assuming that you, like me, have no specialist medical knowledge, do you know what an idiopathic ischemic infarction is? Me neither. I had to look it up in kanji.
特发需血性梗塞
Footnote 21. Tokuhatsu kyoketsu sei kosoku. End footnote. Looking at the kanji, I at least know that blood gets blocked from going somewhere suddenly and for an unknown reason. Do you know what it means to sinter something? I didn't, but the kanji are so clear. Soul ketsu. Burn plus join. I'm reminded of this anecdote from a Japanese professor related on page 14 of the book Chi no Shukaku, or An Intellectual Harvest, by Kure Tomofusa, and originally taken from Suzuki Takao's Kotoba no Shakaigaku, or The Sociology of Language.
特に面白いのは漢字の造語能力に注目した一文である。鈴木隆夫は諸外国の大学でも講演をしているが、エール大学でこんなことがあった。黒板にピセキャンスロープと書いて意味を問うても、居並ぶ米人教授たちで意味がわかる人がいない。鈴木が日本ではこれを猿、ピセック、人、アンスロープと書くので、おぼろげな意味は小学生でもわかるのだと話すと、米人教授たちは皆驚いたという。
Summary. Pithecanthrope, a word incomprehensible to the group of Yale professors that Suzuki was meeting at a conference of some kind, would be accessible to an elementary schooler in Japan, thanks to the power of kanji. End quote. I guess you could always rub salt in the old Sokal wound and claim that sociology professors are dumb, but that would be mean. The end. Sorry for the long post. It's goofy that a group of people should have to defend their own written language from illiterate foreigners, but there you go. I wanted to leave out the history part, but I left it in because it's relevant in terms of the whining people do. Take-home lesson here, get used to text. Next time you think kanji or French conjugations or German cases are the problem, realize it's just you not spending enough time with real text. I know how you feel. It's so slow. Footnote 22. A look back at my logs shows that I've been avoiding using Chinese in favor of Japanese, for speed reasons. End footnote. It's this, it's that. Just keep finding something fun. It doesn't have to look good or academic or serious or cool. It just has to be in the language in question. Even reading movie titles counts. Today, after playing a video log of my computer activity this past week, I noticed that I had been avoiding reading Chinese in favor of Japanese because, well, I can read Japanese faster. Then again, after hundreds of thousands of Japanese SRS repetitions, anyone could. No one is born knowing how to read. In every language we know, we are all slow once. It's okay to suck. Just find something fun and keep at it. But whatever you do, don't run away from your target language. This will only hurt you. Stay. Read. You will get better. Narrator's note. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. This is definitely the longest post that we've done, and would like to take 1 second and ask if you would consider subscribing or liking this video if you feel like it's worth it. I've been making and posting multiple of these videos every day, so if that interests you, we'd love to try to get past that 500 subs to get to the next stage of the YouTube channel growth and hopefully reach more people past the average of like 20 to 30 we have been recently. Anyway, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.